Money has a way of revealing family secrets that were meant to stay buried forever. For 47-year-old marketing executive Rachel Chen in Seattle, that revelation came through a certified letter from a law firm she'd never heard of in Portland, Oregon. The envelope, marked Urgent Estate Matter, sat on her kitchen counter for 3 days before she found the courage to open it. What she discovered inside would not only change her financial future, but reveal a truth about her past that someone had been desperate to share from beyond the grave. Rachel Chen had built what most would consider an enviable life in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. At 47, she was the director of digital marketing for a tech startup downtown, owned a beautifully renovated craftsman home, and had recently gotten engaged to David Park, a software engineer she'd met at a friend's dinner party 2 years earlier. Rachel had always been proud of her independence. Born in San Francisco to Chinese immigrants, she'd worked her way through the University of Washington, landed a job at Microsoft right after graduation, and slowly climbed the corporate ladder before branching out into the startup world. Her parents, Henry and Susan Chen, had passed away within 6 months of each other when Rachel was 35, leaving her their modest home in San Francisco's Richmond district and about $80,000 in savings. What made Rachel's success even more meaningful was that she'd achieved it all as an adopted child. Henry and Susan had been open about the adoption from the time Rachel was old enough to understand. They'd adopted her as a newborn in 1977 through Catholic Charities in San Francisco. Her birth mother, they'd told her, was a young college student who couldn't care for a baby. The adoption had been closed. No contact, no information beyond basic medical history. Rachel had occasionally wondered about her birth family, especially when she was planning her wedding and thinking about family medical history for future children. But she'd never pursued it actively. Henry and Susan Chen had been loving, supportive parents who'd given her every opportunity. As far as Rachel was concerned, her story had begun with them, which is why the certified letter that arrived on a rainy Tuesday in October 2024 was so completely unexpected. Rachel had been working from home that day, reviewing campaign analytics for their latest product launch, when the doorbell rang. The postal worker handed her the thick envelope addressed to Rachel Chen, formerly Baby Girl Morrison, with a return address from Whitfield, Stevens & Associates, attorneys at law, Portland, Oregon. The formerly Baby Girl Morrison notation stopped Rachel cold. She'd never heard the name Morrison in connection with her adoption. Her original birth certificate had been sealed, and her parents had never mentioned any names beyond saying her birth mother was young and unnamed in their discussions. For 3 days, the letter sat unopened on Rachel's kitchen counter. Every morning, she'd see it while making coffee and feel a mixture of curiosity and dread. David noticed her distraction but didn't press when Rachel said it was probably just some legal thing that got misdirected. Finally, on Friday evening, with David out at his weekly volleyball game, Rachel poured herself a glass of wine, sat at her kitchen table, and carefully opened the envelope. Inside were several documents and a letter on law firm letterhead, dated just 2 weeks earlier. The letter began formally. "Dear Miss Chen, we represent the estate of Margaret Elizabeth Morrison, who passed away on September 15, 2024, in Portland, Oregon. We have been directed by Ms. Morrison's will to contact you regarding a significant bequest." Rachel read the sentence 3 times. She'd never heard of Margaret Morrison. There had to be some mistake. But as she continued reading, the details became impossible to ignore. Ms. Morrison spent considerable resources over the past decade locating you through private investigators and adoption search services. She was your biological mother, and according to her final instructions, she wished to provide for you in a way she was unable to do during her lifetime. Rachel's hands began to shake as she read the next paragraph. Ms. Morrison has left you the entirety of her estate, valued at approximately $2.1 million, including her home in Portland's Pearl District, investment accounts, and a collection of fine art. Additionally, she has left detailed letters explaining the circumstances of your birth and adoption, which she hoped would help you understand her decision to place you for adoption. Rachel set the letter down and stared at her kitchen wall. $2 million from a woman she'd never heard of, a woman claiming to be her birth mother. It felt like something out of a movie, not her real life. But there were specific details that couldn't be coincidental. Her original name, Baby Girl Morrison, her birth date, even the name of the adoption agency. The letter continued. Ms. Morrison was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in early 2023. Upon learning her prognosis, she intensified her search for you and spent her final year preparing this inheritance and the accompanying explanations. She specifically requested that we inform you that her decision to place you for adoption was the most difficult of her life. But she believed then, as she believed until her death, that she was giving you the best possible chance for happiness. The letter concluded with an invitation to meet with the attorneys in Portland and retrieve what they called Margaret's personal letters to you, 17 years' worth of birthday letters, Christmas letters, and life updates that she wrote but never sent. Rachel called in sick to work on Monday and spent the day researching. Margaret Elizabeth Morrison had indeed existed. Rachel found her obituary in the Portland Oregonian. Born in 1956, died at 68 after a brief battle with cancer. She'd been a successful interior designer with her own firm, never married, no other children mentioned. The obituary was brief and formal, noting her contributions to several Portland charities and requesting donations to the American Cancer Society in lieu of flowers. Rachel's internet search revealed more. Margaret Morrison's interior design firm, Morrison Design Studio, had an impressive portfolio. She'd designed spaces for upscale restaurants, boutique hotels, and private residences throughout the Pacific Northwest. Her LinkedIn profile showed a career spanning 4 decades, with glowing recommendations from clients and colleagues. A call to Whitfield, Stevens & Associates confirmed the inheritance was legitimate. James Whitfield, the senior partner, explained that Margaret had been his client for 15 years. She'd updated her will 18 months ago, shortly after her cancer diagnosis, specifically to include provisions for Rachel. Rachel's next call was to Catholic Charities in San Francisco. After some back and forth and faxing of identification documents, a social worker confirmed that yes, Rachel had been placed through their agency in 1977, and yes, her birth mother's name had been Margaret Morrison. But they couldn't provide additional details without a court order. That evening, Rachel told David everything. He listened without judgment as she explained the inheritance, the letters, the complete upheaval of everything she thought she knew about her origins. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I think I need to go to Portland," Rachel said. "I need to understand who this woman was and why she gave me up, and I need to know why she never tried to contact me until now." David offered to come with her, but Rachel felt this was something she needed to do alone. They arranged for her to fly to Portland the following weekend. James Whitfield had offered to meet with her personally and had arranged for her to visit Margaret's house, her house now, technically, to begin understanding the life of the woman who'd given birth to her. The flight to Portland was turbulent, which seemed fitting for Rachel's emotional state. She'd brought a folder with copies of all the legal documents, her adoption papers, and a notepad full of questions she wanted to ask. As the plane descended toward PDX, Rachel looked out at the city where her birth mother had lived and wondered what answers were waiting for her. Whitfield, Stevens & Associates occupied a restored Victorian in Portland's Nob Hill district. James Whitfield was a kind-looking man in his 60s who greeted Rachel with genuine warmth. "Margaret spoke about you often during our meetings," he said as he led her to his office. "She was so proud of what you'd accomplished, even from a distance." "From a distance?" Rachel asked. "How did she know anything about my life?" Whitfield explained that Margaret had hired a private investigator in 2014, nearly 10 years ago. She'd wanted to find you for years, but was afraid of disrupting your life. When she was diagnosed with cancer, she decided she couldn't leave this world without trying to understand what had become of you and without explaining her story. The investigator had provided Margaret with regular updates. Rachel's graduation from college, her career moves, even photos from her social media accounts. She had a whole album. Whitfield said gently, "Pictures of you at company events, your engagement announcement, photos of your home. She knew you loved hiking and that you volunteer at the animal shelter. She was incredibly proud but respected the boundary of the closed adoption." Whitfield handed Rachel a wooden box, beautifully crafted and obviously expensive. "These are the letters Margaret wrote to you over the years. She started writing them when you turned 18, thinking that perhaps someday she'd have the courage to send them. There are birthday letters, Christmas letters, updates about her life. She wanted you to know that not a day passed without her thinking of you." Rachel opened the box with trembling hands. Inside were dozens of letters organized by year and occasion. The first was dated August 15, 1995, her 18th birthday. The envelope was addressed simply to "My daughter, Rachel," in elegant handwriting. With Whitfield's permission, Rachel opened the first letter. It began, "My dearest Rachel, today you turn 18, and I'm wondering if you ever think about the woman who gave birth to you. I hope you don't think about her with anger or resentment, because every day for 18 years, I have thought about you with nothing but love and pride and hope that you are happy." Rachel had to stop reading. The letter was so personal, so full of love and longing, that it felt almost too intimate to read in a lawyer's office. "She really loved me," Rachel whispered. "More than you'll ever know," Whitfield confirmed. "Margaret never forgave herself for giving you up, even though she believed it was the right decision. She used to say that becoming wealthy later in life felt like a cruel joke. If only she'd had money at 18, she could have kept you." Whitfield handed Rachel a key ring. "Margaret's house is yours now. She specifically requested that you see it before making any decisions about the inheritance. She said the house would tell you more about who she was than any letter could." Margaret Morrison's house in Portland's Pearl District was a converted warehouse loft, modern, sophisticated, and obviously expensive. Rachel stood on the sidewalk for several minutes before using the key, overwhelmed by the idea that she was about to enter the private space of a woman who'd been thinking about her for decades. The loft was beautiful, exposed brick walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, and carefully curated furniture that spoke to Margaret's career as an interior designer. But what stopped Rachel in her tracks were the photographs. Professional photos of Rachel from various stages of her life were displayed throughout the living room, some clearly taken from a distance at public events. In Margaret's home office, one entire wall was dedicated to Rachel. It contained copies of her school newspaper articles from high school, her college graduation program, printouts of her LinkedIn profile updates, and even a copy of the engagement announcement she and David had posted on social media. It was like a shrine to a life Margaret had watched but never been part of. On Margaret's desk was a baby book, but not for Margaret. It was titled Rachel's Book and contained what appeared to be Margaret's attempt to document Rachel's life from afar. Report cards, somehow obtained, school photos, purchased from online services, college acceptance letters, public records, and even what appeared to be a copy of Rachel's apartment lease from her first job in Seattle. In Margaret's bedroom, Rachel found something even more personal. A small bassinet in the corner, obviously antique and lovingly maintained. A note attached explained, "This was your bassinet during the 6 weeks I kept you before the adoption. I could never bear to get rid of it." 6 weeks? Rachel had always been told she was placed immediately after birth. The adoption papers said newborn placement, but apparently Margaret had kept her for 6 weeks. Why hadn't her adoptive parents told her this? What had happened during those 6 weeks? Following a narrow hallway, Rachel discovered what could only be described as a nursery, painted in soft yellow with a rocking chair, changing table, and shelves full of children's books. A note on the rocking chair read, "I prepared this room when I found out I was pregnant with you. After the adoption, I couldn't bear to change it. It became my place to think about you and imagine what your childhood was like." On the nursery bookshelf, Rachel found a leather journal marked, "For Rachel, the truth about your beginning." Inside, Margaret had written a detailed account of Rachel's birth, the 6 weeks they'd spent together, and the agonizing decision to proceed with the adoption. According to the journal, Margaret had been a 19-year-old college student when she became pregnant. The baby's father was a professor who'd abandoned her when she told him about the pregnancy. Margaret's parents had disowned her. She'd worked at a diner while pregnant, saved every penny, and initially planned to keep the baby. But 6 weeks after Rachel's birth, Margaret realized she couldn't provide the stability and opportunities she wanted for her daughter. The adoption agency had found Henry and Susan Chen, educated, financially stable, and desperate for a child after years of infertility. Margaret had made the decision she believed was best for Rachel, even though it destroyed her emotionally. The journal continued with Margaret's life after the adoption, how she'd thrown herself into school and work to avoid thinking about Rachel, how she'd built a successful career but never married because she couldn't imagine loving anyone as much as she'd loved her daughter, how every success felt hollow because she couldn't share it with Rachel. Rachel spent 3 days in Portland, reading every letter, exploring every corner of Margaret's house, and slowly understanding the woman who'd given birth to her. Margaret hadn't been a young woman who casually gave up a baby. She'd been a heartbroken mother who'd made an impossible choice and spent 47 years living with the consequences. Through James Whitfield, Rachel contacted several of Margaret's close friends. They all told the same story. Margaret had been a wonderful woman, kind, generous, successful, but always carrying a sadness that she never quite explained. One friend, Patricia Williams, told Rachel, "Margaret lit up whenever she talked about her daughter in Seattle. We didn't understand at first, but now it all makes sense." Rachel realized that accepting the inheritance wasn't just about money. It was about honoring Margaret's love and sacrifice. The woman who'd given her life had spent decades building something to leave behind for her. Rejecting it would be rejecting Margaret's final expression of love. Back in Seattle, Rachel began the process of accepting the inheritance. She decided to keep Margaret's house as a vacation home and memorial to the woman who'd loved her from afar. The money would be invested and used partly for the charitable causes Margaret had supported, and partly for Rachel and David's future family. Rachel also decided to learn more about Margaret's life and work. She contacted Margaret's interior design clients and began documenting her projects and philosophy. It became a way of getting to know her birth mother through her creative work. Rachel never stopped loving Henry and Susan Chen. They would always be her parents in every way that mattered. But she now understood that she'd been loved by two mothers, one who'd raised her with daily care and devotion, and another who'd loved her from a distance with equal intensity and sacrifice. The inheritance had given Rachel more than money. It had given her the missing piece of her story, the knowledge that her birth mother's decision had come from love, not abandonment. Margaret Morrison had spent 47 years loving a daughter she couldn't raise, building a legacy she hoped would someday reach her, and holding on to hope that Rachel was happy and successful. Today, Rachel wears a small pendant that belonged to Margaret, a delicate crescent moon that Margaret had worn every day since Rachel's birth. In her Seattle home, she's created a small memorial corner with photos of both her families, honoring the woman who gave her life and the parents who gave her love. When she and David have children, they'll know the story of their grandmother, Margaret, who loved them before they were born through her love for their mother. Sometimes the most profound gifts come to us in the most unexpected ways. Have you ever received something that changed not just your circumstances, but your understanding of yourself? Share your story in the comments below, and if this story moved you, please like and subscribe for more incredible true stories about family, love, and the secrets that shape our lives. Next week, we'll share the story of a social worker who opened a case file and discovered something that would turn her professional world upside down and reveal a connection she never saw coming.